Greetings and salutations, my friend. I have been a fan of relationship anarchism before I started to think seriously of anarchism as a political ideology. In this video, I wish to discuss who I think relationship anarchy can be beneficial for, but before we do that, I'd like to offer a sort of a definition of relationship anarchism, because I think there will be probably a portion of my audience who might not be familiar with the term. A lot of the time when people think of relationship anarchism, people associate it with polyamory. And it's understandable. A lot of relationship anarchists are polyamorous, and from what I have seen here on YouTube, a lot of people who make relationship anarchism content have also polyamorous tendencies. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm not opposed to people being polyamorous or monogamous. I wish to offer a bit of a different perspective as a non-polyamorous person, and why relationship anarchism is beneficial for me. I really think of, if you have monogamy on one side and polyamory on the other side, I think of course, you will have some places in the middle, like open relationships, some open relationships that are just temporary or experimental for a while. I think of relationship anarchism as a sort of meta relationship philosophy. And I think the best way to explain what this philosophy is exactly is by applying two principles. Those two principles are, first and foremost, and this is also based in political anarchism as well, it's about rejecting the hierarchies. So as much as a political anarchist will reject unfair societal hierarchies, in relationship anarchism, we focus on relationship hierarchy. So, the normative way of looking at it is that your romantic and sexual partner is sort of like the most important relationship in your life, and a lot of people view it that way. We think of it as more important than Platonic relationships in our life, and so on. A relationship anarchy breaks up with that idea completely. There is no hierarchy between the romantic, Platonic, sexual. Also, there is no hierarchy within relationships that are romantic and or sexual for people who practice a more polyamorous version of relationship anarchy. The second very important principle of relationship anarchy is that all relationships are unique. There is no one-size-fits-all solution to how relationships should be done, yet our society sort of believes that there is a certain pattern we should follow in how we develop our romantic relationships and what form they should take. I mean, how many times have you heard someone saying, well, when are you guys gonna finally get married? We're gonna get married! Overall, I think that this by-the-book approach is harmful to the way we connect with people. Now that that's out of the way, let's focus on different types of people who I think relationship anarchism can be beneficial for. Number one, polyamorous people skeptical of hierarchy in their relationships. A lot of polyamorous relationships have like this primary relationship or primary partner and then secondary partner. There's a lot of focus on that hierarchy, and there's like so many rules in those relationships. And I'm not talking from experience because I have never been in a polyamorous relationship in my life, but I know people who have, and there can be focus on this hierarchy, like you should spend more time with your primary partner rather than your secondary partner, and so on. There might also be certain rules in those types of relationships, such as you live with your primary partner, whereas your secondary partner is someone you see on the side. Or certain couples also have, these rules that you only sleep with the same people I'm sleeping with. Not as me, but the partner. If you have had this kind of experience with polyamory and you don't like it, or skeptical towards it, or you wish to reject it, then relationship anarchy might be just for you. Then you might start thinking, I value all the people in my life. Why should I devote my time to someone when it's not my choice, but rather a rule? I should live by the rule of the relationship. I just generally think that most connections are much more beautiful when they're done out of your own will rather than a rule. Number 2, you do not wish to conform to normative rules of relationships and relationship milestones. This can apply to monogamous people as much as polyamorous, perhaps even more so, because monogamous relationships can have this tendency to be more based in those normative rules to begin with. Think of it in terms like there's a script written by society, by culture, traditions, relationships in the history of your culture and your society and community that existed from the past. They create a sort of expectation that this is what a relationship should look like. We might think of it in terms of like, okay, so there's dating, you date someone, you enter a relationship, you develop that relationship, you move in together, you get married, you have kids, and you might say, well, you don't have to do those things. Yeah, of course you don't. But that doesn't change the fact that this expectation that this is what a relationship should look like exists. Let's say you disagree with that, you don't want to do it that way because you're an individual, you're not a script, you don't think that this universal one-size-fits-all solution works for you. Fine, you don't have to live together with someone. You can choose how you want to connect with people, how you want to do relationships. You don't have to follow this pattern that you have to date someone in order to enter a relationship with them. It can start as something completely platonic. In fact, a lot of the time, and this is very relationship anarchist of me, I think of platonic and romantic as a sort of gray zone. I think there's a big gray zone in between. And you might feel like you have had certain relationships in the past where your partner relied a lot on those milestones and you felt probably uncomfortable by that. That isn't exactly what you wanted. I think the best thing to do in that situation is to not conform to that when you know it will not make you happy. Because living an unhappy life is quite a curse, really. And so if you want to live fulfilling life, do not give in to that, form your relationships the way you want to in cooperation with the other person. Talk, discuss what your expectations are, what it is you actually want. A lot of normative relationships, they aren't really based in this type of communication because a lot of people assume that if you want what's normal, that other person you're meeting probably also wants the same. Right, like you operate on an assumption, you enter a relationship on an assumption, and then you find out, oh wow, a lot of relationships fail because you don't really know the person, you just see them through the lens of your own expectations and your own preferences. And relationship anarchy would sort of break up with that idea, and you form your own connection in the way that works best for you. Number 3. You do not think you should compromise your own life and dreams for another person. I put this one here because I think it's sort of connected to the previous example, really a sort of continuation of that, because this type of script and expectation, what they create is that a lot of the time, in most relationship, one person is conforming more to the other, and one person has more expectations for the other person to conform to them, to their way of living. And a lot of the time people think, I have to give something up because I love him or her. And I'm just thinking that is absolute nonsense, because if they love you, they wouldn't want you to compromise your own wishes, your own desire for the way you want to live your life. I'm thinking of that as sort of entitlement and lack of respect to the other person. That has nothing to do with love. You might even think that that person you are with or have been with thought or wanted to own you at a sort of entitlement that you belong to them, and you start to feel like you're choking, you're drowning, you want to get out, and by all means you should. I think that relationships are much more beautiful when you sort of think like, I want to spend time with this person, I want to do this and that with that person, not because I have to, because we're in a relationship. That's why a lot of the time in like early stages of developing relationship, you do it out of your will, like you want to, but later on it becomes you have to. And worst case scenario, you might even feel resentful towards that person. And that's what normative relationships a lot of the time create. That's why so many relationships and marriages fail. I don't think that anybody owns anybody or has a right to own anybody. You can appreciate person, you can love them, you can be of help to them, you can be there for them, offer emotional support. They might offer you their love and emotional support, but I don't think you have a right to demand that, especially by using arguments such as, I'm your boyfriend, I'm your husband, I'm your wife, whatever. Number 4, you don't think that your romantic/sexual relationship should be the most important in your life. Unfortunately, there is this expectation that it should be the most important, right? But who's to say, that that person should be more important to you than your friends, your family, non-human animals in your life? I'm not that big fan of the word pet. I think it sort of reduces an animal to something you own. I rather like to think of living with animals in my life in symbiosis of sort. At least that's how I view my relationship with my cat. She's lovely. She's a lovely little fluff ball. Again, I think this also stems from a sort of entitlement. Like, I'm your boyfriend, I'm your husband. You should spend more time with me than you spend time with your parents or your friends. And what's even worse, they might also think they should be the most important person in your life. And a lot of the time it is also present in relationships that haven't lasted that long. Like 2-3 years, that's nothing, right? Because you have known your friends for much longer, you probably developed even better connection with them. What about your family that you have known since, basically since the beginning of your life? They have been there, and suddenly, there comes this person, and this entitled person who believes that they should be more important to you than all these other people in your life. You know how ridiculous that sounds? You can reject that sort of hierarchy altogether. Thinking like sexual relationships, romantic relationships on the top, family, friends, pets, animals in your life, so on. You don't have to follow that hierarchy. And I don't mean you shouldn't be forming any kinds of hierarchy. You know, a lot of the time people think like anarchists, they just want to reject all hierarchies. I'm not opposed to all hierarchies. Actually, I think hierarchical thinking is part of our nature. It's very instinctual, actually, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just more in favor of hierarchies we form naturally rather than by following a societal script. So let's say my parents are the most important people in my life, and that comes purely from me. And while there are also a lot of people who I appreciate, who I love, I can't deny that I do love my parents more. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think we should be rejecting that type of hierarchy. There will always be people who you will love and appreciate more than others. I don't think we can achieve like perfect equality in that way. But what I think we can do is reject this societal hierarchy of expectations of who you should love more. You know, love more those people who you actually do love more.
I love that car more than anything that I have.
Dad, what about us?
You need a Q-tip?
Number 5, you don't want to have romantic relationships, or you have no desire to have them. This too is a continuation of the previous point, number 4, because who is this rejection of hierarchy more beneficial to than those who don't engage in romantic or sexual relationships? You know, if you fall into that category, and the society might make you feel like you're missing out on something very important, that somehow the connections people who have those relationships, that connections that people who marry have, will be stronger than the connections you have in your life. This might make you feel like your life is sort of inadequate. You might even feel envious of what they're having, especially when you're not developing feelings of romantic nature for people, or if you've experienced some sort of trauma that makes you avoid such relationships. I mean, to some degree, I think it's also important to work on that. But for many reasons, there are people who are not going to have romantic relationships, and even people who do want to have them but won't have them. You know, either because of mental illness, disability, many other factors. Sometimes just purely bad luck. You just won't come across a person who's right for you. That happens, right? And I don't think that the relationships you're having in your life with your friends, family, non-human animals are any less important. And I think it can be helpful if you start thinking of it. You know, those relationships I have in my life, they're just as important as these people who are married and who have also friends who are married and hang out together, all of that. You're not missing out on much. It's just that those connections you are forming, they're of sort of different nature, but they're not better or worse than that. They're just different. And most importantly, you don't really have to feel lonely for that reason. Some people who do not seek romantic relationships also establish very important partnerships in their life. They're sometimes referred to as queer platonic relationships. You know, close relationships between people who have a platonic relationship. Friends who move in together, you know, there's like so many different ways of approaching it. You know, you might have one platonic partner in your life. You can have several close platonic partners in your life. You can move in with a group of 5 friends who you love and appreciate. If your family's up to that, move in with your parents, especially if they're getting older. They will really appreciate that help and time you're giving them at that time. You know, a lot of older people end up feeling lonely, and you can be there for them. If your parents are super important to you, offer them that love and support that they have offered to you in your the early years of your life and be there for your parents in the late years of their life. I think it's really, really beautiful. And again, it's not better or worse than a standard married lifestyle. It's just different. Number 6, asexuals. Now, this one's kind of obvious, right? If you think you're asexual, or if you for some reason don't wish to participate in sexual activities with other people, you might find yourself in a hard situation, because you might either want to be with someone who's also asexual, and a lot of the time those people won't necessarily be right for you, but you will join those relationships purely because you think, oh, I found someone else who's asexual, and so I should. And then in actual sexual relationships, if you enter those, a lot of the time asexuals might feel like they have to compromise and have sex. And not all asexuals dislike sex, of course, but if you do, you shouldn't compromise, just like you shouldn't compromise when it comes to your lifestyle and everything else, as I discussed previously. And here comes relationship anarchy, which I think can be super beneficial if you're asexual, or if you're like me, choose to live a celibate lifestyle, do not wish to participate in sexual activities. I largely do it for moral reasons. But how can it be beneficial? And I think there's just a very simple solution to that. Let's say your partner has a different partner who they participate in sexual activities with, that you don't have to participate in. You can stay at home and read a good book or hang out with your friends while he or she's out there doing
boom boom.
And everybody's happy.
Exactly. Everybody benefits.
And you don't have to be polyamorous yourself, but your partner might be. And that's okay. Number 7, you're not able to spend time with someone all the time. Again, normative relationships have these expectations that you should be with someone a lot, or even sometimes all the time, or almost all the time. Especially if there's this expectation of living together. And that just won't work for everyone. I myself, I'm someone who gets very tired when I'm around people. I need a lot of time alone. I need to focus on my things, and I always prioritize my interests, my hobbies, my work more than anything else. And I would lie to myself if I said that I can prioritize another person in my life more than my interests and hobbies. That's just not gonna happen, and it's something I have to be honest about with myself and with other people in my life. And I think one group of people who would really benefit from relationship anarchism, because they can't spend too much time with someone, are people who are disabled, whether because of physical disability or mental illness. I think when it comes to work, job, work environment, we accept that people with disabilities, mental illnesses, a lot of the time are not able to have a full-time job, right? You might have a part-time job, or whatever works for you. I work to the best of your ability, but somehow, even then, we still have this expectation that as far as relationships are concerned, you should give 100%, right? And the thing is, like, a full-time relationship is actually harder than a full-time job, right? So, like, hey, this person, can't work a full-time job, but shit, I don't care. I'm with that person. I expect they'll be in a full-time relationship with me. I think that we should normalize this concept of part-time relationship. And a lot of the time, in like a normative way of thinking, when I think of it like a side relationship, and I just think that, this again plays on this hierarchy. It reduces the importance of that relationship. I think we should just call it part-time relationships. I love the idea of part-time relationships, and we just meet sometimes. So I'll give you some of my time to the point where it doesn't drain me, when it doesn't make me feel like I hate myself and my life because of that. And by doing that, we'll both be happier.
Everybody benefits.
Number 8. Almost everyone. I'm not saying you should call yourself a relationship anarchist or embrace it fully. Hell, I don't embrace it fully. But there will be some aspects of relationship anarchy that will probably appeal to you, unless you're just a very, very controlling person, or you love adhering to the rules and laws and all of that, and you love following the societal script, sentence by sentence, letter by letter. Just form your connections the way that works best for you. And I think this is something that can work for almost everybody, really. Alright, that's about it. Let me know if you agree, let me know if you disagree, and if you think there are other groups of people that relationship anarchy could be specifically beneficial for, please comment it down in the comment section of this video, and I would love to read your comments. Might be something I've never actually thought of, because I'm locked in my own head, trapped with my own thoughts. I hope you have a good day, take good care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video. Ciao.